What up, Ho Biscuits? It's your girl Skitten, back at it again. First and foremost, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are staying safe and sanitized. Y'all, tell me why. Tell me why. Tell me why. I called Dr. D this morning, and initially I was just gonna have her on the phone for like 15-20 minutes. I was just calling to give her like a brief little life update because I had some bullshit happen this morning. I'll tell you guys about it another time. I called this girl, God, probably at like 9 o'clock. I called her at like 9 a.m. And here I am. It's 12:40. I just got off the phone with that girl. If you cannot do that with your best friend, is that really your best friend? I didn't even realize how long we'd been on the phone. Like, I kind of noticed when we hit like the hour mark because like I had to look at my phone for something and my phone said like, oh, 1 hour and like 8 minutes or something. I was like, oh, damn, I didn't realize we'd been on the phone with her for that long. I did not notice that it had been another 2 hours until I got off the phone. We might have a problem. My best friend and I might enjoy each other's company way too much. Because what do you mean? Anywho's ends. That's how I spent my morning. How did you spend yours? Talk to me about your morning. Talk to me about what you did today. Today we are here to watch some more Emkay. The title of this one is The Best Revenge Stories on Reddit. And I want to address that I'm very aware that a lot of the stories on Reddit are clickbait, rage bait, / fake, right? Like they're fake, but that does not keep me from enjoying them, and I don't want it to keep you from enjoying them, okay? Do we question the existence of dragons in Lord of the Rings? No, we just enjoy Benedict Cumberbatch pretending to be a dragon, right? That's what we do. And I feel like that same suspension of disbelief needs to apply to Reddit stories. With all of that said, I'm super excited to see what this video has in store for us. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Boss tried to sleep with my fiance. Oh, good God, this is going to be interesting, isn't it? I mean, they've all been interesting, don't get me wrong, but this one, All right, let's see what we get. This was several years ago. So my boss, an extreme type A personality, found out I was seeing a young lady at another one of our offices. It was a long-distance relationship. He was the type who liked to control everything and mess with people for fun. He was also married to another employee, but he was very unfaithful. And he had a hobby, photography. He liked to take pictures of himself and his conquest in the act. Then he would show the pics around the production floor and brag about it. Well, that seems... But how do you stay working at a place if you're... Never mind.
That is, like, sexual harassment, no? Is that... my HR reps speak out here if I have any of you. Is that not sexual harassment also? Also, if I worked with my man, right? And my man cheated on me and was showing other people at work, we would have to fight. We would have to, like, what? So not only are you humiliating me in private, but you're bringing that humiliation public? Nah, I gotta kick your ass. I gotta knock you the fuck out, like...
Well, on his next trip to this other office, he tried to get my girlfriend to sleep with him, but she spurned him. He made up some lies and got her fired.
Oh,
very cool. It took a long time, but I was patient. I knew he kept the photos in his office. He could not risk keeping them at home where his wife might stumble upon them.
What are you talking about? How does his wife not already know if he's showing people at work? I feel like stories like this do not take into account how quickly gossip travels amongst coworkers, even if they work in different offices. Like, okay, who is calling me? Go away. Oh, it's Dr. D. I just got off the phone with you, girl. Go away.
One Saturday, I was working overtime, and the cleaning lady came through. They unlocked his office. I came in acting like I was taking dimensions on some drawings. The lady just asked me to close the door when I was finished. She left and went down toward accounting. And that's when I went through his desk.
This is illegal. This is... not... This... You're admitting to a crime.
Sure enough, in the back of one drawer, I found a stack of photos 4 inches tall. I took them all.
4 inches? See, yeah. Okay, you know what? I talked about suspension of disbelief at the beginning of this video. I'm gonna... Okay.
I took them all. Then I waited until he went on another trip. When he did, I went out for lunch. I had a dozen pictures of him, in the act with 4 different women, all showing his face. The women all had dark or red hair. His wife is a blonde. I drove to the town he lived in, to the closest post office to his house, and mailed the pictures to his wife with no return address.
How do you know where he lives? What is going on here?
She divorced him, and her lawyer took him to the cleaners. My girlfriend is now my wife, and we aren't mad anymore.
I'm not angry anymore. Well, sometimes I am. If you haven't heard that song, that little interlude by Paramore, do yourself a favor. Go listen to it.
Seemed like someone needed some consequences for his actions.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. Because, first of all, why would he print out the pictures? Why would he print out the pictures and bring them to work? Why would he do such a thing? When you could just take the pictures on your phone, save them to the cloud, but not your phone. Or they literally have apps where you can lock something away in a secure folder that looks like a different folder. Like, I am not understanding. I'm not getting why he would keep the element of his own destruction in his desk. And his desk's not even locked. You have incriminating evidence in your desk and you don't lock it? You are bad at this. You are terrible. It is pure dumb luck that your wife hasn't caught you previously because, again, like I was talking about before, word fucking travels fast, bro. Word travels fast.
An attorney's dream case. My parents versus the bank. In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage, and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house.
Who is Bob?
Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line in the blueprints, and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told, don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to drywall, not the studs. Using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet.
I feel like you guys don't know what cabinets are for. All I have is heavy things to put in my cabinet. What are you talking about? What are you saying to me?
The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway, and so on. When the bank's representatives showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then, representative became angry, as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door casing included fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building houses than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off.
I'm so confused why the bank paid Bob in the first place. I thought the way that those loans worked was that you get the money and then you choose to pay whatever contractor you choose. Why was the bank dealing directly with Bob in any case? I don't understand.
My mother was a stay-at-home mom in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children while my dad was working 2 jobs while all this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot, and my dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure, and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. Great. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle, the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and my mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then, abruptly, Tom smiled. Let's get everyone together for a meeting, he told my parents. Tomorrow. Oh boy, man, what did he see? So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank.
I feel like this is going to go poorly for both the bank and Bob.
Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, well, my clients have decided that they no longer want the house. Please remove it. Everyone started to laugh. Remove it? Have you lost your mind? Tom, in a sweeping theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off of my client's land. Bob's attorney stared at the deed and then turned to Bob. You built the house on land you don't own? Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. You didn't finance the land the house is on? The representative stammered. No. Tom said firmly, as I said, gentlemen, you are trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state at once. My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket. Plus, he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% that they had given him. Yeah, I don't like that Bob was seemingly going to just get away with building something that's actually completely dangerous.
Like, it's literally unsafe. I cannot live in this house. What are you talking about?
In kitchen cabinets with drywall anchors? No. Should not be working in this industry, that's for sure. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment, but to sign off on the house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace or repair everything from the roof to the basement before they could safely live there.
And they can't sell the house until the house is good enough to be in a livable condition. You'd be screwed.
Bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money. They're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people. It was all such a misunderstanding. Oh, I bet it was. And the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately at no extra cost, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage. Bob got the rest of his money and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired. And Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life.
And he didn't have to do nothing except read some fucking paperwork. He made out like a bandit, as most attorneys do. Well, I won't say most attorneys do. As attorneys are wont to do on occasion. I'm not going to speak for all attorneys because, I know some severely underpaid and overworked attorneys.
Before you question this tale, please remember that this was 1973 and that was 50 years ago. Banks did things differently back then. Smaller rural banks in particular were not run the same way. The bigger city banks were, that is. There were far fewer federal regulations, and in a smaller community, people didn't always follow them anyway. I'm pretty sure they don't always follow them now.
Banks just be doing shit, just to be clear. Banks will just do shit. And, there's nothing you can really do about it. So, this story was confusing, but not surprising to me.
They built a wall through the bathtub. No, I'm not making that up. I even left out how a plumber left his lunch bag on a partially built kitchen cabinet, but the cabinet maker didn't feel like it was his job to move the bag, so he left it there and built the rest of the cabinet around it. I don't even know where Bob found these people, but they were gems, every single one of them, man. Hell yeah, victory. When I wrote my dad's obituary, I didn't mention my mom and exposed her years of abuse and neglect. My dad died December 1st, 2022. He briefly lived with me before his passing after a long stint of being chronically ill for the past 15 plus years. As his health declined, he relied more on my mom for things. Prior to this, she was never a great person and fully took advantage of his disability and mobility issues as he declined. For years, she claimed to be separated and divorced, talking to other men on the internet. She made claims many times that she was going to move away and marry someone else. In addition, she took advantage of him financially. We tried every legal avenue we could find to have her kicked out, arrested, or force her out, but those attempts were met with responses that it was a civil matter and there was nothing that could be done.
Because if your dad is not pushing for divorce, if your dad is not pushing for any of this, you can't speak on his behalf because he is of sound mind. He's allowed to make whatever decisions he wants. He can choose to have this lady leech off of him, and there's no legal recourse for you. There's nothing you can do. The cops can't do shit for you.
He made me durable power of attorney and added me to all of his accounts. Nice. This is a small portion of her abuse, but I promise her actions were no less than neglectful and exploitative.
And I will take your word for it, internet stranger.
I've tried for years to get my dad to move in with me, but he wasn't leaving the house he worked so hard to pay for. I brought him home on hospice the day after Thanksgiving and made sure his final days were the best they could be. After meeting with the funeral home to carry out his final wishes, I was told they required consent from my mother to allow me to cremate him. Why? I mean, I get married. I guess I get that, but okay. It was no surprise she initially told me no and only agreed after I allowed her to keep the Social Security survivor benefits, which would have been hers anyway. I wrote his obituary and left her out of it. There was not a single word or mention he'd ever been married or had a spouse. I didn't feel she deserved to be recognized or viewed as a grieving widow when she spent their marriage as a spouse in person.
Yeah.
She lost her mind, and there were many questions from friends and family alike. Well, she can suck it, I guess. I've spent years in therapy working through maternal narcissistic abuse and believe if she didn't want me to talk about it, she shouldn't have done it.
I vibe with that 100%. I really hate this whole concept of like, oh, don't talk about your family business. Don't put your family business out there because like, oh, your parents would be so ashamed or your abuser would be so ashamed. Not ashamed enough to not do it. Right? Not ashamed enough to fix and amend the behavior. Right? You're obviously not that worried about being embarrassed if you are willing to do it. Because me, I don't do things that I'm embarrassed about. I don't do things that I'm not willing to stand behind or at least admit to. I'm like, I don't sit here and lie about who I am to people. If you are a liar, right? If you like to present a facade to people and you're concerned about that facade crumbling in the face of criticism, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. I'm not here to keep your secrets. That's not what I'm here to do.
When people ask about it, I was honest about the years of abuse my father and I endured from her.
Okay.
I completely ruined the public image and victim complex she spent years creating. I might be the villain and whatever in this scenario, but I...
Asshole. It's from Am I the Asshole? They're saying that they're the asshole.
Do it again in a heartbeat.
As
Former manager made my life hell, and I finally got her fired. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. When I was offered a new role, I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great. And that part has not changed.
Okay.
However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane.
Damn.
I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, move or cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race.
What does that mean? What are you talking about? First of all, why is a manager commenting on my physical appearance, not as it pertains to like dress code, right? Why are you talking about me, my body whatsoever in a way that is not just like, hey girl, like you looking good or whatever, which even that I'm like, that's kind of, but like depending on who it's coming from, I'm like, don't talk about me. Don't talk about what I look like. I know I look good. You don't need to tell me. I'm good. What are you talking about? Moving and canceling vacation days is one of those things where I understand there's just like a difference of opinion, you know, in the different generations and how they work. My vacation days were always and have always been immovable if I've already planned the vacation. If I'm just considering a vacation and you're like, hey, could you not book the vacation on this day? Could you do it for this? I'm a lot more open to discussions. But if my vacation's been planned, been booked, been like it's done, I'm not moving shit. Do I have the available time? I'm taking it. And if you call me at 11 p.m. on weekends, I will simply not answer my phone. Right? Like,
So she's racist? The list of personal slights so long that it could fill 3 pages.
Right.
I would talk back to her and she did not like that. And that provoked her more.
Punch
I
her.
only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't even know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised considering half of her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him.
Sweet.
I was thrilled.
Thanks,
well,
Gary.
turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I'm not qualified for this role.
What are you talking about? If you are not my direct manager, why are you speaking to me?
Gary overheard and finally told her off and started loudly talking about how I'm not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled the list of Jane's offensive comments and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try and keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he did not have the authority to do that. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Oh, I love that health crises have to financially screw people over here. It's so cool. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying for 5 to 10 roles a day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company that I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him a congrats, let me know if you need any insights on the new place. We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted.
And that's the part where the story becomes unbelievable. The people who write these stories always have to throw in just one little nugget, just one little piece of the story where you're like, okay, and this is where we go off the rails. And this is where we go off the rails. Because I fully believed everything up until this point.
And why wouldn't you? Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new big shot in a giant conference.
Also, usage of the word big shot. Like, nobody talks like that, please.
In a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I'm unqualified and an idiot. That I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead.
Why? Does Jane have no sense of self-preservation? Jane must have an inflated sense of her own self-importance. That's the only thing that would make this make sense.
Didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her. So 2 levels isn't a big leap. And I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour call with Big Shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general. But the evidence he needed was Gary confirming that her whole team has been turned over. My prior resignation letter, which was still sitting on my desktop when I logged in upon return, and a few other nasty emails she sent her recent staff, which they were happy to share. Big Shot fired Jane on Friday.
Bye, Jane.
Get wrecked.
Well, that was incredibly satisfying. Those stories, even if they're not necessarily based in reality, are always fun. It's always nice to hear about people getting their comeuppance. I'm a big fan of happy endings, okay? Like, don't have me watch nothing where the people don't end up with the person that they love and everything is good, okay? I just, like, smacked myself in the face with my hair. Don't have me watch none of that, though, okay? This is what I want. I want the satisfying ending, even if there's that little, that little thing in my mind where I'm just like, this is fake. This is not real. This didn't happen. But it still feels good. It feels good to hear. Anywho, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. Let me know if you guys want more of this. There's more to this video and there's more where this came from. So I'm definitely super down. And other than that, peace out, Hope Biscuits. It's Skittin' Lit.